Hello. Today I'm going to be talking about brain banking for Huntington's disease research. A couple of things that I'd like to really focus on are why it is really important to advance research and why people might like to donate their brains. I'd also like to give a lot of information on how you can donate your brain and what this means for your next of kin. And so if you look on the internet and you look at different brain banks, they're all going to focus on this first point I have here, that brain banks are a centralized resource that researchers can call on to do research. They can distribute specimens of brains, and you can make use, like hundreds and hundreds of researchers can get data out of a single brain, and we can answer a million different scientific questions. But I think this is not really what goes through people's heads when they're considering a donation. I think brain donation is really about optimism and hope for the future, that every individual can make a contribution to research. And I think everybody has this underlying hope that their donation will help, prevent diseases in the future and help us treat these horrible diseases like HD. So what can a brain bank do? We can do techniques that are impossible in living individuals. We can do probes, we can cut things, we can look at what's going on in the human brain rather than a rodent brain. But I think the critical thing is the reason to bank these specimens is that we don't know what to do with a lot of these things yet. So there's future technologies coming on board, and having these brain banks will allow researchers in the future to call upon these tissues and do the research that they need to do to generate solutions and treatments. Just some examples of important things that brain banks have done in the past. They've been critical for other diseases like Alzheimer's disease, ALS, Pick's disease. Recently, in multiple sclerosis, they discovered a virus that can cause multiple sclerosis. We also found unique things in the human brain. That's why we need to do research on human brains, specific protein pathways and development, even unique brain regions that don't exist in any other species. So why the Iowa Brain Bank in particular? There are literally hundreds of brain banks around the world, but successful science needs big samples. So having samples that pertain to a specific disease are important to kind of have in one location, so researchers can call on as many different individuals that they can. And one of the things that we focus on in Iowa in particular is juvenile Huntington's disease. Another reason for Iowa is that we have been involved in several large HD studies, including Predict HD, Enroll HD, Kids HD, Change HD, and we are increasing our focus on juvenile Huntington's disease. We have some grants in submission for this. We also have some highly advanced MR equipment. So we have a bunch of dedicated research scanners. This is my lovely wife's legs here posing in the scanner. We also have a 7 Tesla facility, so we can get extra high quality images, which I'll show you some in a little bit. So Iowa has this confluence where we are aggregating a whole large sample of HD brains. We have the advanced scientific equipment to do testing that we can't necessarily do in other facilities. So who can donate to a brain bank? Literally anyone. Anyone can donate. In particular, we need anybody who has a disease. We also critically need individuals who don't have a disease. We always need to have a comparison to make to normal, non-diseased individuals. One important point is unfortunately, if you're an organ donor, that doesn't automatically mean that you're enrolled in donation for science, so these things are all separate. So how to enroll in the Iowa Brain Bank, there's some information there. I'll put it up again at the end just so everybody can see it. But the actual process is very simple. When the time comes that you decide you want to make a donation, you can call our Decedent Care Center. They'll guide you through the process of consenting, getting all the paperwork in order. And our Decedent Care Center will coordinate with the funeral home to make all the arrangements to transport things back. Pre-registration is preferred. We really prefer that people set this up ahead of time. It helps relieve a lot of stress for families, at an important time in their lives. Sometimes people don't think about it or even know it's an option until after someone passes, but next of kin can provide consent. But we do strongly encourage potential donors to talk to their families, talk about donation, and in particular, if you decide to donate, advise others of your wishes. As for funeral arrangements, brain donations are typically conducted very quickly. The turnaround time is about a single day. with the exception of weekends and holidays, but generally 1 to 2 days. Brain donation does not interfere with any funeral arrangements. They pay particular attention to aesthetics to make sure nobody would know that the brain has been donated at the funeral. We understand that not everybody lives in Iowa. So if you're not in Iowa, you can actually make a donation anywhere. We're actually putting together a network of pathologists around. The green dots here represent pathologists we've actually worked with, and the red ones are ones that are standing by because we have potential donors in the vicinity. Typically what happens in these cases, these pathologists and our decedent care center will coordinate together, and they will work together with the funeral home. The funeral home will transport the body to the pathologist. They'll extract the brain, put it on ice, ship it to us, all within 1 to 2 days. There may be additional paperwork that gets involved at that point, but it's all very simple. The costs, as for the costs, there should be no costs to the families for brain donation. We cover all transportation to and from the funeral home, all the brain extraction, autopsies, and all that stuff. Families are still responsible for funeral expenses. This is a critical point, is once we have the brains, we de-identify everything. So the identity of brain donations is strictly confidential. We don't send out people's information. Everything is de-identified. So even if you send tissue out a decade from now after it's been stored, there's no way that those results can be tied back to them. So it does make things difficult to share those scientific results with the family. So what happens with donations once we get them? So brains are extracted, shipped to us within 24 hours of death, which is ideal. You can see this picture of a live, recently extracted brain. It is very, very squishy. It has the consistency of kind of like a hard pudding or hard custard. So what we generally do is we split it in half. We freeze half to do certain types of research. The other half is fixed. Or sometimes if we're beyond that 24 hours, the frozen is not very viable anymore, so we just fix the whole thing. And this is a fixed brain, so essentially this is after it's been sitting in formalin for 10 to 12 weeks. It becomes relatively hard, kind of like a bologna type consistency. And this way we can safely cut it and whatever. And then we prepare the brain for, I'm not sure if this is working. There we go, okay. So what we do with brains is one of the things we want to do is we want to get an MR scan of every brain so that we can actually start dissecting these virtually. So we don't have to cut to get a sense of all the anatomy.
Okay. I love tech issues. Yeah.
No. Oh, yeah. So brains are then prepared for MRI. So we put each brain into this container that fits inside the MR machine. We put it in a special fluid that doesn't have any magnetic signal, and we put it on a shaker table under vacuum for about 24 hours to shake out all of the air bubbles. Every air bubble will create an artifact. Yeah, is that? Every air bubble creates an artifact in the MR machine, so we pay very close attention to getting all these air bubbles out. And it's kind of mesmerizing to watch it spin. So then we scan these brains at ultra high resolution. You can see on the slice image here, you can start to see all kinds of interesting things like the basal ganglia. These areas are particularly impacted in Huntington's disease. You can also see the layers of cortex. And from these, we can construct these 3D models. If you look at this brain here, you can see these are the same brains. You can see there's actually a little cut in here where the pathologist cut a little too deeply. You can see that cut here on this image. So we can do a very high resolution reconstruction of these brains. After scanning, brains are cut and stored for research requests. When requested, we ship these samples out, and they can do all kinds of staining and fluorescent dyes and Western blots, and essentially the sky's the limit for whatever researchers they can do on these tissues. So just to reiterate, I'll leave my contact information up here.